Hello and welcome to Quays News Space Special. The 10th of March marks the halfway point in Tim Peake's International Space Station mission. Joining me in the studio will be Dr. Don Thomas, a former NASA astronaut who has travelled to space on 4 separate occasions. He spent a total of 44 days in space. Don Thomas will be providing an insight into Peake's journey and discussing his own career as an astronaut. Dr. Don Thomas, thank you for joining us in the studio today. Firstly, I want to ask you about your journey to becoming an astronaut. You were inspired to become an astronaut when you were around 6 years old, if that's right.
Right. I was 6 years old when they launched the first American into space from Cape Canaveral in Florida. And at my elementary school, primary school, they brought us all to the gym. I sat on the floor and watched the small black and white TV that day as they launched into space. And as soon as the launch was over, I knew I wanted to do that. So it's something I dreamed of doing from a young boy. And my excitement continued when I saw Neil Armstrong go to the moon, when we started building space stations. I just wanted to be a part of that. So it's been a lifelong dream of mine.
And it's a dream many children have at some point in their lives, but how did you make that dream a reality?
You know, the one thing that I did that some people don't do is I never gave up on that dream. And it took 33 years from 6 years old, a little boy, until I made it to space. And there's a lot of distractions along the way, but I just stayed focused. I always tried to work hard and do my best, but I never gave up on it. It took me 4 tries applying to get into the astronaut program. So the number one lesson I've learned in life is to never give up, to keep working hard, and to never give up on your dream, no matter what you're working on.
Did you have an idea of how to become an astronaut when you got into it?
As a young boy, I had no idea. As a 6-year-old, I had no idea what it took. But they had publicized how, thousands of people applied and NASA selected 7 Mercury astronauts. So I knew the competition was going to be tough. And that was the key to me, that if I wanted to do this, I needed to work hard, do my best. And only through that effort would I have a shot at ever becoming an astronaut. As I got older, I started seeing paths. We built the Skylab space station. They were selecting science astronauts. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. And then they started the shuttle program. We started selecting more civilian astronauts, PhD, doctorate astronauts in different fields. And it became clear to me, okay, this is my path, to get there. So I had a little bit of help by watching who they were selecting, and just that dream and desire inside, burning inside, that kept me going on my path.
So if a young person wants to become an astronaut now, is there something like a checklist of things that they need to achieve on the way to becoming an astronaut?
The thing that I recommend to students is work hard every day in every subject. Math and science for sure, but also art, gym, music, no matter what you're working on, because you really never know when something you're learning today is going to help you down the road. And I tell them, work hard, do your best, and never give up. If you would like to be an astronaut and you're not doing so well in your math classes, it doesn't mean give up. It just means get a little more help in math. That's what I had to do. So just keep working hard, get the help you need, and keep just pressing on towards your goal.
And on your first shuttle mission in 1994, you conducted 80 experiments in the space of just 15 days. So what I wonder is, what's your routine like? Is it a 9 to 5 kind of day, or how do you work in space?
We work on a 24-hour clock in space, 24-hour day. They give us 7 or 8 hours to sleep. We get up in the morning. They give us an hour to get up, clean up, have breakfast, and be ready to start working immediately. We'll work on different science experiments for a few hours until it's lunchtime, take an hour break there. And then sometime during the day, they'll give us an hour to exercise. We'll have a little bicycle we'll ride to keep fit. We keep working, take a break for dinner, work a few more hours in the evening. And then at the very end of your day, you may have an extra hour or two just to look out the window to relax and unwind before you go to bed and get up the next day and do it again. So it's a very structured, very packed time up in space. The space shuttle was very busy. Up on space station, it's a little more relaxed. They're up there for a long time, for 6 months. And you just have to make sure you don't overwork the astronauts. If you keep them too busy, day after day after day, they'll burn out. So on the station, they're a little more considerate and spread things out a little bit.
Well, and that leads me to my next question, which is, I mean, things like eating and sleeping and washing and all those kind of things are a struggle in space where they're routine activities here. So how do you relax?
For relaxing in space, you know, it's a pretty intense day. You're concentrating the whole time. So I would just go to the window and watch the Earth go by. We're traveling 5 miles a second, and it only takes 90 minutes to orbit the Earth. So if we had an hour with nothing to do or half an hour, I would go to the window, put some music on. I love listening to Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and just orbit around the Earth and just enjoy the beauty, you know, enjoy the scenery, the peace, serenity of the black sky at nighttime. And that was just a great way to relax a little bit and, you know, quit worrying about the experiments for just a short time.
And I mean, the experiments obviously preoccupy your mind, but it's also a profession as an astronaut that's quite perilous, quite dangerous. How do you deal with that aspect?
You know, there's always a risk on a rocket. We're sitting on 2 million liters of explosive hydrogen and oxygen. We've got solid rocket boosters, very explosive fuel. And I'm sitting in my seat just a few feet away from all that fuel. So if something bad happens, you know, I don't have a great chance of survival on the space shuttle. But we do a lot of safety checks. You know, we've got great teams of people getting the shuttles ready. So I was always ready on launch morning. Having met the people, having trained, ready with the crew, you feel totally prepared. You feel like you've got this incredible team of people behind you helping out. And it just gives you the confidence on launch morning to strap in and get yourself ready for launch.
And I mean, on your third mission, you did actually have some issues. How did you deal with that at the time?
On my third flight, we had a problem with the fuel cell. It's a device that generates electricity on board the shuttle. And we fly with 3 of these. One of the 3 started acting up, and mission control thought it could catch fire. They thought it could explode. So they said, shut that one down. And we still had 2 operating. And a few hours later, mission control said, you know, we're not sure whether those other 2 don't have that same problem. So they decided to bring us back to Earth. And it was 2 days later we actually landed. It wasn't an emergency landing. We would call it an expedited landing. So we're coming down quicker just to be on the safe side. Nothing bad happened. We were never in peril. I never felt in danger. Our crew never felt scared about the situation. Our main emotion was just one of disappointment that we had to come home early and that we couldn't accomplish our whole mission on that flight.
Well, and talking about coming home, how does that actually work? Because we always see the images of space shuttles launching into space. Returning, we don't see that many pictures of that. What happens? You
know, the return back to space takes about 55 minutes. So we fire an engine in the back of the shuttle. It'll slow our speed just about 500 miles an hour. And that's enough for gravity to take over, and we begin our fall back to Earth. We fall halfway around, you know, planet Earth. We end up landing at a runway at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida there, touchdown like an airplane. But that fall back, there's about 15 minutes when we're in the middle of a giant fireball. A plasma envelops the shuttle. You look out the front windows and all you see is a red-orange glow there. And sitting in my seat returning, I could look out the window right above my head, just 5 feet above me, and I would see huge flames peeling off the shuttle. They would grow to 20 feet long or so and then peel away, and then a new one would start forming. And I'm sitting in my seat looking up there, and I know it's 2,000 to 3,000 degrees right up there. But I just felt safe and secure in my seat. And coming back in, it's a very smooth re-entry. Every now and then, a little bit of turbulence, like on a commercial airplane flight, but nothing like the rocking and rolling experience we have during launch. Oh, so it's a very quiet, peaceful ride back to Earth. I told you launch was a little scary, but the re-entry, it was just one of excitement that we were coming back to Earth at the end of the mission. And finally, before we go and see what the children of school have asked you, I want to ask if, you know, given the history of space travel, its origins with a space race between the USA and the USSR, how important is the International Space Station in building international relations? The International Space Station has been critical, I think, for, you know, our planet, the peace on planet Earth. We have 15 countries that have participated in the International Space Station. We got Russia, the United States, European Space Agency representing many countries. We've got the Canadian Space Agency, Japanese, we've got Brazil. So we've got all these countries working together with the one goal of building and maintaining a space station. So we've got astronauts from these 15 countries that cycle through the space station. It's been manned continuously with people since 2000, so 16 years already. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, we got astronauts working up in space from 15 different countries. We got Tim Peake up there right now representing the UK, been doing a great job up there, having a great time, I know. And he's just one of the participants from 15 countries. And I think it's one of the greatest achievements of the space station itself is just that international cooperation. The United States and Russia, as you can imagine, are always having political conflicts, not always, but frequently having conflicts. Right now, with Syria, there's a lot of conflict there. And even though we've got some political differences, we focus on space. And it's really an amazing cooperation that our countries have, all 15 countries working together with that objective of keeping the station up there, keeping the astronauts safe, conducting science, and just exploring the universe.
Well, we'll talk a bit more about that and talk about Tim Peake in a moment, but first of all, it's enough of my questions. We've got some questions from school children. Year 5 pupils at Didsbury Road Primary School in Heaton, Mersey, Stockport have been learning about space travel in their lessons. We asked the children, aged 9 to 10, to provide a few questions to Don.
Which planet do you want to explore most and why?
Planet would you like to?
Yeah, I think I would like to go to Mars. It's on our horizon. We're getting ready to explore Mars in the future. I wish I could go there, but unfortunately, I'm too old for that. We're building new rockets called the Space Launch System. This is being developed right now at NASA. We'll be launching them at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Just in about 2 years, in 2018, we'll do the first test launch. And these rockets are bigger and more powerful than anything we've ever had. They will allow us to leave Earth, to go to the moon, out to asteroids and on to Mars. And that would be the planet that I would like to go to the most, would be Mars. Unfortunately, I'm too old, but our students that just asked that question, that is the perfect generation that will have that opportunity to go on to Mars. Yeah, and I wish them great success on their journey.
Maybe one of them will go up to Mars.
It very well could be, maybe influenced by Tim Peake up there today, get them excited and inspired. They could be on their way to Mars in 25 or 30 years from now.
Okay, we've got another question.
What is the most interesting experiment you've done in space?
We've done many interesting experiments. I was fascinated by looking at how fires burn in space. And everybody's familiar with a candle flame here on Earth, how it comes up to a point because hot air rises and it draws that flame up to a point. In space, with zero gravity, hot air doesn't rise. And so a flame doesn't burn coming up to a point. In space, a flame will burn perfectly round, perfectly spherical. And to see a little droplet of fuel burning perfectly spherical, having this round fire, perfectly round, just floating in the air there, was just fascinating to watch that.
Right, we've got a few more questions. Here's the next one.
What's the strangest thing you saw from space?
The strangest thing. On my first mission, I saw a flashing light out the window of the shuttle. And, it caught my attention. It was flashing once a second. And I thought, what is that out there? And I'm watching it, and I notice it's moving with the space shuttle. I can see city lights down below. It's not there. And I thought maybe this is some kind of spacecraft. Somebody's rendezvousing or approaching us. And I watched it for 10 minutes, and I finally realized what I was looking at. And it turned out to be a chunk of ice that had come off the shuttle that was kind of turning end over end. And it had a flat side to it. And when the sunlight would hit it, you would get that flash. So what I thought initially might be an alien craft signaling me, it just turned out to be a chunk of ice. And that may be one of the stranger things that I saw there. It turned out it wasn't that strange of an object, but you see it and you wonder what you're looking at. I've passed over Hawaii in the middle of the night, and on one of my missions I saw it looked like a red river just glowing down below us. And you see that bright red river and you wonder, what am I looking at there? What is that? And then you realize, that's hot lava coming from Mount Kilauea. So you see things that are really strange at first, and then like, what is that? That's I'm looking at lava, or I'm looking at a shooting star re-entering the atmosphere, and you just see so many interesting things up in space.
Yeah, so the strangest things, the most normal things can become very
Some of the most
strange and
normal things,
peculiar.
like I mentioned, I just said the shooting stars. Normally, when we look for shooting stars, we look up at the sky. And while I was up on space on my first mission, I'm looking at city lights down below, and I saw a little zip of light go by, and I didn't know what that was. It's like, what was that? And then I realized that's a shooting star. I'm just up above it. We're 200 miles up. Those are entering the atmosphere 30 or 40 miles above the Earth, and you're just not used to having that perspective, having to look down to see a shooting star. We're just so used to looking up in the sky.
Oh, we've got another question.
What does it feel like landing on Earth after a mission?
Landing on Earth after a mission is just an exciting moment. Coming back to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida there, after being up in space in 2 weeks, we would come back, we touch down like an airplane, roll out on a nice long runway called the Shuttle Landing Facility. We come to a halt, put the brakes on, and we sit in our seats and wait for them to open the hatch where we can come out. And when we first get back from space, you feel like you weigh a couple thousand kilograms, a couple thousand pounds. I just felt so heavy. My arms were heavy, my legs were heavy. I just wasn't used to being in gravity. And it's, you're a little wobbly, you're a little dizzy when you get back. So it was difficult to get out of my seat to stand up. I had a little rope right by my seat to help steady me. And you take a few steps and slowly you get your balance back. But the number one sensation is just one of being totally heavy, that you can barely lift your foot off the floor, and one of dizziness. But you're so excited to come back. I couldn't wait to see my family. We would go and get a hot shower and have a fresh meal. They have a lunch for us there. They would have fresh fruit, fresh salad, all these foods we haven't eaten in a couple of weeks since we were in space. And just again, to return back to the Kennedy Space Center, being back on Earth, my crews were always excited. Nobody was sad to be leaving space. We were all excited about accomplishing the mission and coming back to see our families and get back to normal life again.
And I think we've got one last question from the pupils.
How does the weightlessness in space affect your body and mind?
Boy, some great questions from your students here. A lot of things happen to the human body in space. Some of the main things that happen are muscles get weaker because everything is weightless in space. I can lift this TV monitor with one finger. I can lift your car with one finger in space. So we don't use our muscles at all, and they tend to weaken, or atrophy we call it, in space. So our astronauts come back with weakened muscles. We also lose our bone strength. Our bone density decreases in space. The one thing that stimulates bones to grow, to make them strong, is putting weight on them. And again, in space, there's no weight on your bones, so they tend to get weaker. So those are the two main things. We're also exposed to more radiation in space than we're normally used to here on Earth. So there's a higher risk in the long term of maybe developing some cancers or other health issues related to the radiation exposure. But the real big ones for the astronauts are muscle and bone loss. And we exercise every day, 2 to 3 hours up in space, trying to maintain our muscle strength and our bone density. But we still come back with weakened muscle, weakened bones.
Well, thank you very much for answering those questions. On March the 10th marks the halfway point of Tim Peake's mission. I'm interested in discussing the life of an astronaut, and you've brought some props to address it. Can you talk me through some of these objects? Maybe we'll start with the food, which you mentioned earlier.
This is some of the space food. It's all freeze-dried because we don't have refrigerator freezers up in space. It's hard to preserve it. So everything's freeze-dried, comes in these small plastic packages. To prepare a meal, you poke a needle inside the little port there, inject water. That dry, hard food will absorb that water, it'll soften up, and after a couple minutes, we just cut this open with a pair of scissors and eat it with a normal fork or spoon.
And it doesn't just fly away?
It doesn't float away because it's kind of sticky and pasty.
Oh, okay.
And all the food has a blue dot of Velcro on it, and after we'd make our meal, we could just Velcro it to ourselves. And you float to a window and you could watch, the Earth go by as you have lunch or dinner. So it's really handy. I heard Tim Peake's first meal up in space was a bacon sandwich, and he had a proper cup of English tea up there. So,
wow.
you know, even though we've got a multinational crew, it's not just American or Russian food. They support all the cultures, you know, that are participating in International Space Station. So I was glad to hear they have bacon sandwiches up in space.
Has food changed a little bit since you've been to space then?
It's changed in that it's very international. So the crews can access, you know, select Russian foods, Canadian, Japanese food, you know, foods from many different countries. We're flying it up there then. And the food gets a little better over time. The selection, you know, has been broadened, and I think just the quality of the food is a little better. When I was flying about 20 years ago, after 2 or 3 days in space, I was kind of sick of space food. And, you know, I was craving, you know, fresh salad or fresh fruit. But I had to wait until I got back to Earth for that.
Okay, and the other product that I want to have a look at is these actual space gloves that have been to space. I'm going to try one on.
These are gloves from a Sokol spacesuit. This is the Russian spacesuit that they wear during launch or landing. And these came from astronaut Peggy Whitson, an American that launched about 4 years ago to the International Space Station. Tim Peake would have worn these same gloves during launch. If you see video, you'll see him wearing these gloves, maybe pushing buttons there during liftoff. And they're made to protect you if there's a cabin leak or if there's you know, smoke filling the cabin. You have your spacesuit, helmet on, and the gloves, and everything will protect you, you know, until you get to orbit there.
And what are they made of? What's the material that we have here?
You know, it's got a rubber bladder lining, kind of like a balloon, to keep the air close to your body there. And then it's got like a canvas material on the outside. It's got a little bar here called the palm bar. Just it allows you to make a fist in space, you know, against the ballooning effect of the pressurization of the gloves. And then it's got a metal ring here made out of aluminum that'll attach to the rest of your spacesuit and seal it up.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for giving that insight. I mean, and thanks for letting me actually put on a space glove. Didn't think I'd ever do that. Well, we're going to watch a clip now of Tim Peake's family watching the launch. And I wonder what it's like for you to say goodbye to your family when you're going into space.
It's a little tough to say goodbye to your family. You know, you don't know whether you're going to make it safely back home after the mission. And it was always just sad to say goodbye. At the end, you know, when it was time to say goodbye to my wife or my kids, it was just a sad moment.
And did you communicate to people down on Earth?
On the space shuttle, I was able to talk to my wife once for about 5 minutes while I was in space during the mission. She had to go into mission control. Tim Peake and our astronauts on the space station, they have like an internet Skype type telephone, and they could call pretty much anybody they want around planet Earth anytime they want. So I'm sure Tim, I bet he calls home just about every night before he goes to bed, just to you know, check in on the family. And it's a great way to stay connected with everybody here on Earth.
Okay, and Tim Peake is the first British astronaut to don the Union Jack then. Why do you think it's taken the British government so long to support space travel?
You know, they've been active in space in other ways with communication satellites and, you know, astronomical satellites and radio telescopes, things like that. It's very expensive, you know, going to space. And, you know, many countries haven't had the budget for that. But I see the passion here in the UK for space exploration. I've been to a number of schools. I've talked to many people here.
Yeah, I mean, we can see the blast off here and people watching it.
Yeah,
so there's been an excitement around it for
sure.
There's
a huge excitement here. I'm sure he was all thrilled, and I'm sure as it's lifting off, you know, he's like screaming inside his helmet. We've got a great experience at the Kennedy Space Center, shuttle launch experience, where you can get strapped in, it'll shake, rattle, and roll, and it'll give you a really good simulation of what it's like to launch into space.
Yeah, here we see some of the kids enjoying that. Now, I want to ask you now about what you did between 1999 and 2000, which was you coordinated the training of NASA astronauts for missions on the International Space Station. What sort of training and preparation would astronauts like Tim Peake typically have?
You know, because we have many nations participating, the training takes place in many different nations. So the astronauts and cosmonauts, they train in the United States, they train in Russia, they train in Canada, they train in Japan, they'll train at ESA Training Center in Cologne, Germany as well. And depending on you know, what you're doing on your mission, you'll train in different aspects of it. At the ESA Center in Cologne, you'll be training, you know, on the Columbus module. that they have, their science module. And there's just other training. Like in Canada, you would train on the robotic arm. So it's just multi-nation training. You travel around the world, and that's why it takes a couple years, 4, 5, 6 years, to train and prepare for your space flight.
Okay, well, we've taken an adventure through space thanks to you. Now let's take an adventure through time. What does the future of space travel hold?
The future is bright. Right now it seems to be a little bit of a lull. You don't hear a lot about what we're doing in space. The space shuttle program came to an end, but there's a lot of work being done right now in preparation for the future. We're building a new series of rockets called the Space Launch System. They'll be launching out of the Kennedy Space Center, Launch Pad 39B, where the shuttles and many of the Apollo missions took off from. We'll be launching these in just 2 years from now. The first unmanned test launch will take place, and it's going to shake the Earth. It's going to be an incredible sight to see. I hope people will come to the Kennedy Space Center to watch the launch. But this is going to open the door with this new series of rockets to explore deep space. So we're going to be able to leave Earth orbit, go on to the moon, go to asteroids, and then eventually onto Mars itself. So there's a lot of great things taking place. We also have commercial companies like SpaceX and Boeing that'll be launching out of the Kennedy Space Center, out of Launch Pad 39A that the shuttle launched out of as well. We're converting these launch pads for this new series of rockets, and the commercial rockets will go up and down at the space station, and in a few years they'll be taking tourists up to space as well. So you're going to see Kennedy Space Center, again, the world's major spaceport, taking up tourists, taking up cargo to the space station, taking up astronauts, and sending them out to deep space.
That sounds really exciting, so I look forward. Maybe one day I'll don one of these gloves and go to space myself.
You could do it on your own, yeah, and you would enjoy the trip.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Don, here at Quays News. It's been a pleasure having you.
It's been great to be here today. Thank you very much.